What's a secret you won't share with anyone in person, but you are willing to share anonymously? Story 1. When I was about 9 years old, I went over to my neighbor's house. I would usually go hang out with my adult neighbors because they let me watch television and gave me snacks in exchange for helping them. That day, I went with the intention of playing with the foster puppies she had. She wasn't home, but her door was unlocked, so I went inside and played with the puppies. When I walked out of the house, she was just coming down the driveway. There was a bunch of stuff in front of her door that blocked the view from the driveway, so she hadn't seen me come out. I pretended like I had just been waiting for a minute, and we walked back in together. Then I got to play with the puppies again. Story 2. It was a secret my mom confided in my girlfriend, somehow not expecting her to tell me. I found out a month ago, and it still has me shaken. My dad passed away when I was 2 years old, 2 days before Christmas. It always left me wondering why. I am 24 now and just found out the truth. My mom had been unfaithful to him with my stepdad, and she told my dad that he would never see me again. Heartbroken, he ended his life at his workplace after hours because he didn't know where else to go. I always thought it was just a coincidence that my middle name is the same as my stepdad's first name, since I don't remember him coming into my life until a couple of years later. My mom found out she was pregnant with my little sister 3 days after my dad's passing. I always resented my stepdad because he burned all my baby pictures with my dad in them, and I never knew why. I look nothing like him, and I still haven't confronted my mom about it. Story 3. I spent 2 years of my life being taken advantage of by the guy across the street when I was younger. It started when I was 10 and he was 15, probably disguised as a game of doctor or truth or dare. It wasn't until years later, when I look back and realized I had been in elementary school while he was in high school, that I understood what had really happened. It finally ended when I was 12 and my family moved away. He was skilled at manipulation, telling me it was natural and that I'd get in trouble if anyone found out. He showed me inappropriate material and was sometimes violent, once kicking me in the ribs and locking me in a closet a few times. When I finally understood, years later at 16, that I had been only 11 when he was 16, I realized how wrong it was. I knew I would never tell anyone. I didn't want my parents to know because they both worked full-time, and I didn't want them to blame themselves. I would get home from school at 3, and my mom came home at 5. It usually happened in that gap. I never wanted them to feel guilty, so I kept it to myself. My spouse and closest friends still don't know. Story 4. My mom and her boyfriend mistreated me and my 2 younger siblings when we were very young. I was the oldest, about 5 years old at the time of my brother's first birthday, when I first noticed something wasn't right. At that age, I didn't really understand what was happening and thought it was normal. A few days after my brother's birthday, my mom told me he was sick and needed to go to the hospital. On the way, she dropped me off at my aunt's house. At my aunt's, she gave me a bath, and I played with my cousins and watched television until it got dark. Then came a knock at the door. Thinking it was my mom with my brother, I ran toward it. But when my aunt opened the door, she started crying. 2 tall men stood there, police officers. They picked me up and told me I had to go. I screamed for my aunt, not understanding what was happening. I thought maybe they were taking me to my mom. They brought me to a place I can't clearly remember, where I was cared for that night. By the next day, I was moved again to a foster home. It was a big family I didn't know, and it was terrifying. After a few weeks, I was moved once more, and there I saw people I knew, my grandparents and my sister. But my brother wasn't there. I thought he was still sick, but then I learned the truth. The abuse and neglect had been too much for him, and he had passed away. My mother and her boyfriend were charged. At the time, I didn't understand. But as I grew older, I started blaming myself for not being able to protect him, even though I was just a child. Every year on his birthday, I visit his grave with yellow flowers. My aunt said yellow was his favorite color, and sometimes a small toy I think he would have liked. I wonder if he sees me and knows I never forgot him. Story 5. My fiancée is the only person I actually enjoy being around. I don't usually admit that out loud because it would put unfair pressure on her and reveal my antisocial tendencies. I wasn't always like this. It developed over the past 6 or 7 years after a deep depression and a struggle with substance use. I've been happy and substance-free for several years, but I haven't been the same. When I make myself spend time with friends, I usually just sit there thinking about how long I should stay before I can leave without seeming rude. It's hard for me to hold conversations because my mind drifts to thoughts like, when will they leave me alone? Or, when can I go home? I've gotten good at hiding it, so I still have people who consider me their friend. But secretly, I don't find joy in those relationships. I'm not sure why things are different with my fiancée, but that makes me terrified of losing her. I'm almost certain I won't find anyone else I could love like I love her. There were a few months in the past when we split up and I dated other women. Some were very kind and attractive, but I hated the entire process and never wanted to go on more than one date. I wish I could change this part of myself, but I don't know how. Story 6. I own a 5-foot-tall doll while living with my 2 grandmothers and my mom. It was a challenge ordering it and then carrying a box weighing 80 pounds into the house without anyone noticing. I waited outside for the delivery truck so no doorbell would be rung. I had to carry the box through the front door, down the hallway, and into my room. Somehow I managed it without anyone seeing. After a week, it was already difficult to keep it hidden, especially with so many people around. I had to carefully plan when I could use the bathroom to clean it. Once, I put it in the bathtub while I took a shower so no one would question me. When I came out, my grandmother was waiting to use the bathroom, and I just prayed she wouldn't open the shower curtain. Thankfully, she didn't. A few months later, more family members moved in, and I had to share my room with my brother and his girlfriend temporarily. I hid the doll in a big box inside my closet. No one knows I have it, and I'd like to keep it that way. Story 7. My older brother violated my trust when I was very young. We were several years apart, so it was never something that could be brushed off as childhood behavior. As I grew older, I started waking up in fear, lying completely still with my eyes shut tight, hoping the darkness would hide the fact that I was awake. He was angry and violent, and I lived in constant terror of what might happen if he realized I knew. I tried everything to protect myself. Bells on the door handle, thumbtacks on the floor, stacking objects against the door, yet nothing kept him out. Out of desperation, I told my mom that someone was stealing from me, since my belongings often went missing after those nights, and she eventually put 2 locks on my door. It didn't help. The door was mangled. I begged her for cameras or something to protect me, but she refused. Once I left my phone recording audio overnight, and by morning it was mysteriously water damaged beyond repair. This went on until I turned 18. I was so depressed I dropped out of high school. I stayed awake for as long as possible to keep him away, but I could never hold out forever. I became very promiscuous, always having a boyfriend or girlfriend over when my mom allowed it, because having another person in the room was the only way I felt safe. I tried not coming home, but my mom would get angry. In 2015, I finally told her the truth after I learned my brother had a child. I didn't want him near any children. My mom kicked me out of the house. She told me that someone who had been with as many partners as I had couldn't have been abused. She said it had happened to her too, and she turned out fine. My older sister acted like I didn't exist, and my dad said he would rather go through chemotherapy than have a daughter like me. There was an investigation, but my diaries and a 5-second audio clip weren't enough, and the case was closed. I did get a restraining order. I spent 5 months in a shelter because I had nowhere to go. I dated a much older man who hurt me, just because he provided a place to live and food. Eventually, I got a job, saved money, changed my name legally, and left that life behind. I moved across the country. I still carry a lot of anger. I imagine showing up at his funeral one day and finally telling everyone the truth. My parents sometimes try to reach out, but I only send them screenshots of the things they said to me back then. Now I have my dream job, my own apartment, and a boyfriend who knows everything and still loves me. I'm on antidepressants and in therapy, including trauma-focused therapy, and while I still struggle with post-traumatic stress, I'm healing. Story 8. I broke up with my ex-boyfriend because he was unfaithful. Not long after, he and his best friend forced their way into my apartment and waited for me to come home. What started as his attempt to talk me into taking him back turned into something much darker. They held me there, hurting and mistreating me for 18 hours. I never told anyone because they threatened me. My family never understood why I ended things with him, and they continued to invite him to family gatherings. Holidays became unbearable knowing he might show up. I asked them not to, but they ignored me. Eventually I stopped going, and they have no idea why. I miss my nieces and nephews dearly, but I cannot risk seeing him. At this point, so much time has passed that I doubt they would even believe me if I spoke up. I just wish the pain of what happened and the pain of losing my family over it would finally end, but it never does. Story 9. My wife was unfaithful with a professional soccer player. She insists nothing physical happened, but I don't know if I can believe her. I discovered it myself by looking at her phone. She never told me. At the time, we were already having arguments and struggling to get along. One night, I tried to have a serious conversation with her about us, and she admitted she didn't know if she loved me anymore. 2 weeks later, I found revealing photos she had sent him, text messages arranging to meet up, and some of the most hurtful things a wife could ever say about her husband. Then it all made sense. Her emotional needs were being fulfilled by someone else. We have 3 amazing kids, a son and 2 daughters, ages 10, 9, and 7. They are such good children, and I can't comprehend how she could jeopardize our family. We've been together for 20 years and married for 14. I think back to when she loved me and we were happy. Life hasn't always been easy, but it wasn't harder than what most couples face. I have always adored her. She is an incredible mother, beautiful to me, and has a warm, bubbly personality that draws people in. I was proud to call her my wife. Now, about 7 or 8 months later, she still shows no remorse and barely any affection. I feel lonely, sad, afraid, and ashamed. I hate to admit it, but I've had dark thoughts, wishing I could disappear so she could be free of me. But I could never do that to my children. They would be devastated. Sometimes I even find myself praying for a fatal illness or accident. We are still going to counseling, and she did end her relationship with him the day after I found out. She says she loves me but is not in love with me anymore. Her actions confirm it. I haven't told anyone besides the counselor. Friends and family constantly ask what's wrong, but I can't bring myself to tarnish her image. I don't want anyone to see her as anything other than a good wife and mother. Story 10. I, a 25-year-old woman, spent almost 6 years with my significant other, a 28-year-old man. We lived together, and I believe he struggled with bipolar disorder. I worked 2 jobs so he wouldn't have to worry about bills or food. He had a part-time job but rarely went. We both got stuck in a miserable routine, smoking weed every day. I ended up doing all the cooking, cleaning, and providing. It was incredibly stressful, and I lost all my friends because I was either working or too exhausted. 2 years into the relationship, I was unhappy and wanted to leave, but he threatened to end his life if I did. I didn't know what to do. About a year later, I started an emotional affair with a coworker. Let's call him Ben. After a year, it turned into a physical relationship with occasional meetups. This went on and off for nearly 3 years. About 6 months later, I met someone online and had a virtual relationship with him. Then I got involved with another coworker's boyfriend, let's call him Jason, and we ended up being intimate too. At this point, I was still with my partner while secretly seeing Ben, Jason, and talking to the man online. I knew I was behaving terribly, and just because I no longer loved my partner didn't mean I should have treated him that way. Eventually, I cut ties with everyone else, but I was still living with my partner. Later, Jason reached out to me again, and I realized just how miserable I was. I gathered the courage to end the relationship because my partner deserved better than lies. 2 days after I broke up with him, he ended his life. I've been carrying that guilt ever since. Jason has been my support, and we've been together for over a year now. He is the only reason I'm still here. Story 11. I have stage 4 stomach cancer. Over 2 months earlier this year, I lost about 30 pounds, going from 220 to 190. My family and friends urged me to see a doctor. At first, I was misdiagnosed with gastritis. When treatment failed, they thought it was Crohn's disease, then diverticulitis, then ulcerative colitis. Finally, last Thursday, I was told it was gastric cancer. One doctor decided to do an endoscopy, sending a camera down into my stomach, and that's when they found a malignant tumor. It had already spread to my lymph nodes, and now they believe other organs may also be affected. Tomorrow I have another appointment to check. I haven't told my family. My symptoms have been nausea, blood in my vomit and stool, lack of appetite, and feeling full after just a few bites. I've continued to lose weight and now weigh about 175. I'm constantly fatigued, which makes working 60 hours a week in a physical job unbearable. I have abdominal discomfort as well. I've hidden all of this from my wife, kids, parents, siblings, coworkers, and friends. I never told them much, even when I was being misdiagnosed. I don't want to be treated differently or pitied. I just want to stay useful for as long as possible. I've struggled with bipolar disorder my whole life and never liked myself. I once had a suicide attempt 12 years ago but survived. I tried again 3 years later and failed, then almost followed through with another plan a year after that. I have always hated myself and thought of ending my life. I've been an atheist, so I never feared an afterlife. But this diagnosis almost makes me want to believe in something higher. I know this cancer will take me eventually, and while that terrifies me, at least I don't have to be the one to cause my family more grief. Story 12. My fiancé works the afternoon shift, and I work days. When I get home, I feed and walk the dog, then spend the night in my computer room in the basement. Because we don't see each other often, I have to admit that my computer and Xbox room hasn't been as clean as it should be. It's not a complete dump, but it's messy with clothes and empty beer cans. Also, we haven't been very intimate lately because of our opposite schedules. One night after feeding the dog, I went down to the basement, put on a mellow playlist, and opened a private browser window. I won't get into details, but I watched videos for about an hour, enjoying myself. When it came time to finish, I looked for something to use for cleanup. I grabbed a black sock nearby. Some men may act like it's strange, but it's not uncommon. It's simple and easy to throw in the wash afterward. I wrapped the sock around myself and kept going, but something felt odd. During pauses, I felt little tickling sensations that didn't make sense. I ignored it and kept going until I was done, though the feeling was unsettling. As I slid the sock off, I saw the first one, an earwig crawling down my skin. I panicked and threw the sock, only to see another insect crawl out near the tip. I screamed and swatted frantically, basically hitting myself in the process, and ran out of the room. After making sure no more were on me, I turned the sock inside out and found 4 more crawling inside. It was one of the most disturbing experiences of my life. Story 13. Late to the party, but this is something I've never told anyone. The year was 1980-something, and I was in 5th grade. I was a chubby, nerdy kid. There was a 6th grader who bullied me constantly with his friends. Most of the time it was just shoving, name-calling, and heckling, but sometimes it turned cruel. Once, when I was sick in the school bathroom, he followed me in and shoved my face into the toilet after I threw up. Another time, he and his friends picked up dog mess on the way home, put it in a paper bag, and smashed it on my head. Things like that happened almost daily. They lived 1 block past me, so no matter which way I walked home, they could follow. At the end of each walk, he would lean in and say, "You know you better not tell anyone, right?" I never did. He'd threaten to beat me badly or worse if I ever spoke. I had an uncle, really just a family friend, who was a trucker. He always drove cross-country with his little Pomeranian, Brutus. He once told us a story about being confronted at a truck stop by 2 guys. He carried a tire thumper, basically a short, hard wooden stick used to check semi-tires. When they tried to rob him, he pulled the thumper instead of his wallet, hit one guy, and scared the other off. He said he sometimes wondered if he might have hit the guy too hard, but never found anything about it later. Listening to that story, all I could think was how much I wished I had a tire thumper to defend myself from the bully. I told him I wanted one for protection against a mean dog on my walks, and he gave me one from his garage. I remember it had National Truck Parts stamped on it. I carried it in the umbrella sleeve of my backpack. I was too afraid to use it, since it was always 3 or 4 against me, but I thought maybe if I ever caught him alone, I'd finally stand up for myself. Sure enough, one day after staying late for a school project, I saw him following me alone. He taunted me, pulled out a pocket knife, and threatened me. I begged him to leave me alone, but he charged at me. I swung the tire thumper blindly. I heard a crack and a scream, and he collapsed. My fear turned into rage as I raised it again, but he begged me to stop. For a second, I thought about running to get help, but then he spat out another insult. My anger took over, and I brought the thumper down on his leg with full force. Another crack, another scream. Then someone nearby called out, asking if everything was okay. I panicked, covered his mouth, and told him in a cold voice that if he ever told anyone, I'd use his own knife against him. He believed me. I grabbed his knife and ran home. He didn't come to school for about a week. When he finally returned, he had one arm and one leg in casts. He told everyone he'd crashed his bike on a ramp in the woods. He never bullied me again, and neither did his friends. I kept carrying that tire thumper to school every day, though. I hid his knife in my grandfather's attic, but the house was sold soon after my grandmother passed away, and I never saw it again. That was the only time in my life I deliberately hurt someone. I've always carried guilt over it, but I also justify it because of the years of torment. I was ready to help him until he mocked me again. I just snapped. He recovered and went on with his life. I've looked him up since. He had some arrests in the late 1990s, but eventually turned things around. He owns a business now, is married, and has kids. Maybe life gave him a chance to change. As for me, I've never told this story to anyone. Not my wife, not even my closest friends. It has stayed with me all these years. Story 14. I'm a little embarrassed by this, but I don't really care if it's public anymore. When I was a kid, I had a Peter Pan t-shirt, one of my favorite childhood movies, that my mom got for me from Disneyland. It was a bit oversized since I was only about 4 or 5 years old. One day while using the bathroom, I accidentally got some mess on the back near the bottom of the shirt. My mom saw it and decided to throw the shirt away. I was heartbroken because it was my favorite, though I don't blame her because it was pretty gross. From that day forward, I developed a habit of taking off every piece of clothing before using the bathroom, even in public. My dad discovered this when I was 10 years old at a local mall, and he noticed all my clothes on the stall floor. Even now at 23, I still use the bathroom completely undressed at home. In public, I've created a system to avoid putting clothes on the floor. I'll slip my shirt almost completely off with the neck hole still around my neck and my arms in the sleeves, while taking one leg out of my pants and draping it over the other leg so nothing touches the floor. It's a strange habit, but one I've kept my whole life and probably will never change. Story 15. A couple of months ago, I was at a bar and drank far too much. I'm a lightweight and had way more than I should have. 2 men started talking to me, and in my drunken state, I went along and ended up getting into a cab with them. We went back to their place and they led me to a bed. I was so drunk that I fell off, and they helped me back up before removing my clothes. I was numb from the alcohol and remember thinking, let's just get this over with. I obediently went along and performed on one of them. The other man then got behind me and suddenly hurt me in a way I wasn't prepared for. In pain, I shouted for him to stop. To my surprise, he apologized, stopped, and left the room. The other one continued but didn't cross that line. When he was finished, he politely asked if I wanted water. I said yes, he brought it, and then I fell asleep. A couple of hours later, I woke up and saw that, miraculously, all my belongings, my wallet and everything, were still there. I grabbed my things and left quietly. When I got home and tried to use the bathroom, I realized I couldn't without pain, and I saw blood. I cried a little, then crawled into my own bed where I felt safe. Looking back, I honestly believe that if I had told them no clearly from the beginning, they would have stopped. They weren't violent in the traditional sense, more like opportunists who took advantage of my condition. The strange thing is that I don't feel haunted by it. I'm looking forward to a date with a kind man next week. I feel calm, content, and free of nightmares. I know I should talk to a professional about it, but at the moment I don't have the money. Story 16. I was about 14, though I don't remember my exact age. I had never kissed a girl, never really had a girlfriend. I was an awkward, introverted nerd living in a small town. I didn't have many friends, and I wasn't that close with the few I did have. I was the smartest kid in my class, but scrawny and unathletic. Somehow, in just a few years, I went from being one of the cool kids to being ignored by them. Most of the time, I felt lonely and isolated. When my older brother got married, they held a big wedding reception at her parents' house in a town about 10 miles away. It was a huge place, practically a mansion with about 20 rooms. There were bars, and no one cared if kids were drinking. I had a few drinks and was feeling good when someone told me that one of the bridesmaids had a younger sister my age who thought I was cute. Eventually, I found her. She was bright, funny, and nice, and we hit it off right away. She was cute, and I couldn't believe she seemed to like me. I had visions of finally having a girlfriend and felt like this could be a turning point in my life. The mix of alcohol and excitement made me feel like a kid on Christmas morning, discovering more than I ever imagined. We held hands, found an empty room, and sat together on a little couch, talking and laughing. Finally, I worked up the courage to kiss her, for the very first kiss of my life. And right as our lips touched, she got sick and I ended up with vomit in my mouth. She bolted from the room, leaving me stunned. That was my first kiss, and it's burned into my memory forever. Story 17. My dad hurt me from when I was little until the day he was caught being unfaithful to my mom while she was at the hospital with my dying grandfather. When he left, I thought things would get better, but my mom was disabled and couldn't work, and with no income, and my dad having taken all the savings, everything collapsed. The stress of raising me alone, caring for her 90-year-old mother with dementia, and struggling with money broke her down. One day, she snapped. She turned her anger on me, blaming me for everything. She would cry through the night, lash out during the day, and sometimes hit me worse than my dad ever did. I was too scared to defend myself. Sometimes I would just hold her while she pounded my back with her fists. Other times, she would run out into the freezing snow in nothing but her nightgown, sobbing until she came back hours later, silent and frozen. I'll never forget walking into the kitchen once when I was 12 or 13. She had a glass of wine in one hand and a knife in the other. When she saw me, she tried to stab herself. I wrestled the knife away from her. Not long after, during another fight, she called the police on me for assaulting her. My memory is hazy from how much I've tried to suppress those years, but I think I pushed her away in self-defense, and she twisted it into me attacking her. When she called the police, I panicked and ran away. I was 15 with no money and only the clothes on my back. I called a new friend I'd just met at school. He lived nearby, and even though he barely knew me, he came out at 11 at night, calmed me down, and brought me home to his family. They welcomed me and told me I was safe with them. That act of kindness saved my life, and I'll never forget it. The police eventually found me and brought me back. I didn't defend myself when she accused me of hitting her. I didn't want to make things worse for her. They let it go, and that was that. But the scars stayed. Now I live with constant anxiety, mood swings, depression, struggles in relationships, and memory gaps from repressing so much. I even lost my inner monologue. My mind feels quiet and foggy. Things with my mom are better now. I never ran away again. Deep down, I think I knew that what she did was the result of her breaking under the weight of life, not who she truly was. And I knew I had friends I could count on, which kept me going. Story 18. My relapses are terrible. They happen often, and the guilt I feel because of them eats me alive. My post-traumatic stress disorder didn't come from war, and I always ask myself why I have it so bad when others have seen worse. When I was 17, I tried synthetic weed for the first time. I passed out, cracked my head open on a stone table, and slipped into what felt like a never-ending nightmare. The pain from vomiting and bleeding merged with horrific visions, like being part of a giant wheel made of worms, spinning until I was sick. I saw people clawing at me, screaming as their skin was torn away. Eventually, everything disappeared and I was left in a void. No body, no thoughts, just pure pain. I begged for it to end, begged for my life to end, but it didn't. It felt like an eternity. Suddenly, everything snapped back. Lights, shapes, voices. I opened my eyes to see 4 police officers and 4 EMTs holding me down. They were shouting as I fought against them. The moment I relaxed, they pinned me, then looked into my eyes and realized I was back. They carried me out on a stretcher. Before I was loaded into the ambulance, I saw my church pastor watching with his hand over his mouth. I lazily greeted him before blacking out again. When I woke up, I learned the synthetic weed, called spice, had caused an allergic reaction that sent me into cardiac arrest. The doctor said my heart rate spiked so high I should have died twice, and if I had any genetic weakness, I'd likely have lifelong issues. After being discharged, I felt disconnected from myself. I recognized everyone around me, but when I looked in the mirror, I couldn't even comprehend my own face. I only saw a stranger staring back. When I relapse now, I feel it all again. The visions, the pain, The void. People tell me I start breathing heavily, clutching my chest, even crawling on the ground. I never remember those parts. For me, it's just reliving that eternity of torment all over again. Story 19. I was bullied constantly from the age of 5. Teachers even kept me inside during recess so I wouldn't get hurt. Things only got worse when I was 12 and started high school. For a while, I was fine. I even had a girlfriend. But then my old bullies transferred to the same school. They terrified my girlfriend into breaking up with me, and soon I was getting beaten again almost daily. I felt completely done with life. Not long after, I was hit by a speeding car while biking to school. I spent 3 weeks in intensive care. The doctors told my parents to prepare for the worst and even suggested finding a special needs school for me. Everyone said I was lucky that the car was a Volkswagen Beetle with its engine in the back. If it had been any other car, I'd likely have died. To this day, I'm unsure if it was an accident or if deep down I wanted it to happen. In the hospital, my parents refused to consider a special needs school. Instead, they brought me schoolwork every day, then even my sister's homework to keep me sharp. I solved everything on my own. When I returned to school 2 months later, I couldn't focus, even though I knew the answers. By my final years of high school, I'd stopped doing homework altogether, though I could always answer correctly in class. This caused me to fail twice and repeat years. I graduated late, bitter and exhausted. I tried college for computer science but dropped out after 4 months. I hated school so much I couldn't stand it. I spiraled into gaming 20 hours a day for 8 months. My parents grew angry, demanding I work. I finally took a job I hated just to appease them, but they forced me to pay $900 a month in rent, calling part of it back pay for the time I hadn't been working. They even took me to court, and they won. I ended up with debt and no home. I eventually got a tiny apartment and started therapy. My therapist suggested testing, and the results stunned me. I wasn't slow, as the doctors once implied. I was highly gifted. School had never challenged me, which was why I never studied. With the right approach, I could finally thrive. I switched to studying law, loading myself with multiple advanced courses at once, and for the first time in my life, I enjoyed learning. I finished a 6-year program in just 3.5 years. Today, I'm proud to say I have a successful career in law. Through all the darkness, bullying, accidents, fights with my parents, and years of doubt, I found out who I truly was. And for the first time, I feel like I belong. Story 20. Everyone knows the cover story about how my husband and I met. We grew up in the same neighborhood as just friends, went to college together at a local state school, and one winter night when we were snowed in, feelings surfaced and eventually we got married. That's the story we tell our families. The reality, though, is a little different. Only my maid of honor, his best man, and one close friend know the full version. And of course, the strangers of Reddit. We really did grow up as friends. People joked about the friend zone, but we never dated. He once admitted he had a crush on me for about a week in high school, but nothing ever happened. By middle and high school, when the other kids in our neighborhood got into smoking, we just stuck together. We became lifting partners at the gym and built a strong friendship that way. When college came, I thought we'd drift apart because my state didn't offer my program, but the school one state over did. He ended up applying there too with better scholarships, so we both landed in the same place. We kept lifting together. I didn't mind hearing about his casual hookups, and he didn't like hearing about mine. He said he thought of me like a sister. Then came junior year. After a workout, we went into the co-ed sauna. A group of girls from a sports team came in, and the atmosphere turned flirty. They started asking Sewell questions and even joked about practicing certain things. I was always his wingman, so I played along. But when things escalated, one girl tried, then another, but none of them managed much. Caught up in the moment, I surprised everyone, including myself, by stepping in and showing them how it was done. The second it happened, embarrassment hit me, and I apologized and walked away. The car ride back to his place was silent. A few days later, he called and said, "It happened. Let's just move on. I want my lifting partner back." And so we did. For a while, everything returned to normal. Then came the snowstorm. One morning we went to the gym at 5, and by 9 the university had canceled classes. We left in his Jeep, but the storm worsened, and by nightfall I was stuck at his apartment. I slept on the couch until about 2 in the morning when I woke up freezing. Something told me to climb into his bed. When he asked what I was doing, I said, "Something we should have done a long time ago." We cuddled, and that was the beginning. The next morning, he admitted he had wanted to join me on the couch, but was afraid I wouldn't want that. From then on, we weren't just lifting partners. We were partners. We discovered we shared more than just friendship. He turned out to be incredibly open and receptive to my sexuality, and our relationship grew stronger because of that. At our wedding, we toasted to the snowstorm that forced us to see what had been there all along. His best man and my bridesmaid gave us a private toast to the co-ed sauna, but the grandkids will only ever hear the story of the storm. Story 21. When I was a teenager, I made an impulsive decision with someone I hardly knew while staying with friends. It happened more than once, not out of real desire, but out of a careless mindset. Things didn't go as planned, and I panicked, trying to manage the situation on my own. I'll never know if I made it worse or not. The next day, I immediately took steps to protect myself. Weeks later, I was paranoid because my period was 4 days late, though it was always irregular. My friend got me a pregnancy test while we were in Myrtle Beach. I took it in the hotel lobby bathroom. It was positive. I took another the next day, still positive. My mom found out after a friend's mom read her texts. My parents tried to talk to me, but I couldn't even let them say the word pregnant. I just shut down. Later, with my best friend beside me, my mom took me to a clinic and I had an abortion. I was only 6 weeks along. For months afterward, I pretended it never happened. I didn't let myself think about it. But by early 2017, about a year and a half later, I couldn't avoid it anymore. Every time I thought about it, I sobbed. It still happens sometimes. I don't regret my decision. It was what I had to do. Having a baby at that age would have ruined my life, and I wouldn't have the amazing boyfriend I have now, who doesn't know. But it still breaks me inside. My current therapist is the first one I've told. She thinks the abortion triggered my depression. I was already depressed before, but now it feels like exhaustion, emptiness, and low energy. Right now, I'm typing this while crying so hard I can barely breathe, trying not to let my mom hear me. Story 22. I carry 2 secrets, one that people might guess and one I feel I can never say out loud. The first is that I care for my mom, who lives with a mental disability, but deep down I also carry resentment toward her. When I was young, her partner mistreated me, and she looked the other way. Even defending him when the school questioned why I avoided classes, she told me she wouldn't stand up for me again. Later, when he left her and she couldn't manage on her own, her family stepped in. But instead of helping, they took advantage of her and drained her money. Eventually, she ended up living with me. I drive her places, help her with appointments, and keep her life in order. But she constantly embarrasses me, speaking loudly in public, insulting people, or belittling me with comparisons. The worst part is when she recalls that time with her ex and twists my worst memories into funny stories or discipline. It makes me want to scream. The second secret is about my husband. A few months ago, I found out he had been using meth. For about a year, he had strange panic attacks, sleepless nights, and constant restlessness. I stayed awake with him, dragged him to doctors and counselors, and worried myself sick. Then a friend suggested it might be drugs. When I confronted him, he admitted it. I was crushed. He tried rehab but said it wouldn't help, so he quit going. For a while, things seemed better. Then just a couple of weeks ago, the sleeplessness came back. He swears he didn't use, says he was just exhausted and stressed, but I can't tell if I believe him. I haven't told anyone. I'm terrified of the judgment I'd get for staying. I don't even know if I chose to stay or if it just happened. I could have handled the truth about the drugs if he had told me up front, but instead, I was lied to for almost a year while I cried from stress and exhaustion, setting up appointments, thinking it was something else, when he knew the whole time, and that betrayal still eats at me. Story 23. My brother is in rehab now. He failed out of college and cost my parents an incredible amount of money. They've always handed him everything, while I've had to earn everything on my own. I like firearms, which they don't approve of, so I never got any support. I bought all my cars while he was just given another one. I resent my parents for how they treat us so differently, but I still love my brother. What makes it worse is that my parents let him drink in their house. He's underage, in outpatient drug rehabilitation, on multiple psychiatric medications after a suicide attempt, and yet they still buy him alcohol because he asks. When I was his age, I wasn't allowed to drink at all, even though I didn't have any of his problems. I was holding down 3 jobs, had my own car, and lived in my own apartment. Meanwhile, he gets excuses and special treatment. About a month ago, he nearly died from an overdose. I know who his dealers are. When I get upset, I find myself planning out in detail how I'd make them pay, how I'd take them out, and even the steps I'd take to avoid being caught. Recently, one of my brother's old classmates ended up in a coma because those same dealers pressed fentanyl into pills poorly. It makes me think sometimes that the world would be better off without them. I know it sounds angry and dark, but letting this out, even just in writing, feels like a relief. Story 24. My earliest memories are of watching my dad beat my mom. I've been told that his father was abusive too, so it runs deep in our family. I'm 34 now. My parents divorced long ago, and I've cut him out of my life completely. He wasn't invited to my wedding, he's never met my oldest son, and he'll never meet the son I'm expecting this Halloween. My biggest fear is letting down my kids or somehow turning into the man he was. It terrifies me to think I share his DNA. I wish I'd changed my last name before marriage and before my children were born, because I hate being tied to him. I can't stand the thought of carrying on a line of terrible fathers. Every time I lose my temper or overreact, I fight off the crushing fear that I'm just like him. People tell me I'm a good father, but I only see my faults. Maybe that constant doubt, that drive to never be like him, is the very thing that makes me better than he ever was. Story 25. I'm in my 40s, married with several kids, and until earlier this year, I was doing really well in my career. But things took a downturn at the company I worked for, and by January, I was laid off. I had always wanted to start my own business, and with my wife's support, I decided to take the leap instead of finding another job. By July, though, we were falling apart financially. We were 2 months behind on rent, late on car payments, and struggling to feed our kids. Out of desperation, I did the one thing I swore I'd never do. I asked my dad for a loan. A couple of years ago, he had done something so awful that the entire family cut ties with him, and I hadn't spoken to him since. I never told my wife. I just told myself I was doing what I had to do. He loaned me $6,000. I promised I'd invest it into the business and pay him back double, $12,000 by December. But then Hurricane Harvey hit and things got worse. Now it's October and I'm barely scraping by. My wife still doesn't know about the loan, and I'm terrified I won't be able to repay him. The lie, the financial stress, and the fear of everything coming to light weigh on me every day. Story 26. I used to work as a rape crisis counselor, and one of the hardest truths I learned is that rapists don't usually look like the stereotypes we picture. They're not just strangers lurking in alleys. They're often boyfriends or friends. One woman came to us 7 or 8 times after her boyfriend assaulted her violently. Each time she wanted counseling and was ready to press charges, and every time she dropped them after he apologized and go back to him. I grew to hate that man. Months later, before an early morning class, I was in the bathroom when I saw him. I had always imagined confronting him, maybe yelling, maybe even fighting. I wasn't thinking rationally. He was bigger than me, but I was burning with anger. Without thinking, I walked up and tried to slam his head into the wall. I missed and smashed his skull into the hand dryer instead. He dropped instantly, limp, like a rag doll. I panicked. I dragged him into a stall, opened his bag, and took his iPod. Then I walked to another building and tossed it in the trash. Back in my dorm, I dumped out a dozen beers, and later left the empties where people would think I had just been drinking all morning and skipped class. As far as he knew, some stranger had jumped him and stolen his iPod. Nothing ever came of it. No one asked me questions, and I never told anyone. Even my wife, who is sitting next to me right now, has no idea. I've never said this out loud because if I did, it could destroy everything I've built. I know what I did was assault. I've carried that secret with me for years. Story 27. I was almost a school shooter. Back in 1996, when I was a junior in high school, I was bullied mercilessly. My dad had died the year before, my mom was absent trying to cope, and my sister had married the guy who got her pregnant. Someone only a few years older than me who always acted like he was my father. Both buses I took to school were nightmares. On one, kids constantly harassed me. Once, a girl slapped me over and over for an entire ride while the driver barely told her to stop. On the other, a boy tried to fight me daily. When he dropped out, he told his younger brother to carry on the abuse, and he did, every single day. After the slapping incident, something inside me snapped. I decided I was going to kill them all of the bullies from both buses. I had my late father's pistol, a .38, and one morning I put it in my bag along with a box of ammunition. On the way to school, I sat quietly, hand in my bag on the gun, waiting for the moment. When the bully walked by, I froze. I couldn't move. I carried that loaded gun through every class that day, still thinking I might do it. After school, I rode the bus to my sister's, and oddly, the bully left me alone. Nothing happened. The next year, I switched schools. I got a fresh start, and the bullying stopped. My senior year was normal, even good. I never touched that gun again. My mom pawned it a few months later, and I didn't care. Years afterward, I ran into that bully at a party. He said hello casually, having no idea how close he had come to dying one morning years before. I still think about it sometimes. What if I hadn't frozen? What if I had gone through with it? I'm grateful every day that I didn't. Story 28. From as far back as I can remember, I've been physically and psychologically abused by my older brother. He has at least Asperger's, and I suspect narcissistic traits. I myself struggled with narcissism when I was younger, and both I and others suffered from it before I got my act together. Our relationship was predictable. We'd chat about mutual interests, then he'd put me down, order me around, or attack me. As the younger sibling, I'd either try and fail to fight back or appeal to my parents, who never stepped in. Only recently have they admitted why, saying they were overwhelmed raising a child with Asperger's. But tolerating unhealthy behavior doesn't heal it. Over and over, I'd convince myself there must be a good side to him, crawl back, and the cycle would repeat. It has shaped me into someone who feels weak, trapped in patterns that seem unbreakable. At this point, I'm just waiting for him to move away so I can have peace. Several months ago, I came out as bisexual to a few friends. One of them cut contact, outed me to dozens of others, and spread lies that could ruin a reputation, calling me a stalker, mocking suicide. Nobody fully backed him, and some even argued against him, but not one person stood up for me or listened to my side. He made the moment about himself, when it was supposed to be about me sharing my truth, and everyone else let him. It crosses my mind every single day. At first I was furious. Now I mostly feel numb. Friends I admired and respected have stayed close to him while shutting me down whenever I try to talk about this or anything else. The school administration asked for context, but then refused to look at the information I carefully prepared. My counselor told me to focus on what I could change, even though the problem isn't me, it's him. My parents don't want me bringing it up. They get angry, saying I'm throwing away my opportunities even though I'm just trying to save my mental health as it deteriorates. It feels like victim blaming at every turn. I've tried to act differently than my brother, to not repeat the mistakes of my past. But now it feels like the people I trusted most have abandoned me, and that by keeping up my cheerful front, supporting others, and picking up their slack, I'm no better than they are for enabling him. Story 29. I killed my grandmother. It wasn't out of spite. It was euthanasia. I had loved her when she was well, and I could never have imagined doing anything to hurt her. But words became the weapon no one would ever suspect. She had survived 2 strokes already, leaving her not quite herself but still functioning. Then came a rapid series of new strokes. She actually died, but the doctors revived her. After that, her mind was mostly destroyed. She didn't recognize her husband or children. The doctors said she had the mental ability of a 5-year-old. She couldn't understand language, and her only responses were yes or no, depending on gestures or facial cues. The real problem was that her fate was no longer in her family's hands. After her first stroke, she had given power of attorney to her husband, who later passed it on to his son, someone we barely knew. He placed her in an expensive nursing home and refused to sign a do not resuscitate order because of his religious beliefs. That meant they would keep her alive indefinitely, nearly brain dead, at $20,000 a week, all paid from her own bank account. Not her husband's, not anyone else's, hers. My family couldn't do a thing. But I knew that she, my grandfather, and everyone in our family would never have wanted this. To be artificially sustained when there was no hope of recovery. That money had been meant to help provide for her descendants, not make a private care facility rich. When we visited, she seemed lost, unable to focus unless someone grabbed her hand and forced her attention. She didn't understand a thing in English. Then it hit me. She had the mind of a child again. When she was 5, she didn't speak English. She was an immigrant. I tried speaking softly in her native language. Suddenly, she focused on me. She hadn't lost the power of speech. She had lost English. Even then, her comprehension was fragile, but she recognized what I was saying. I didn't tell anyone what I had discovered. A few days later, I called the nursing home and asked to speak to her. They told me she couldn't talk, but I insisted. She understood me, I said. When they put her on the phone, I spoke in her language. I told her I was her family. Then I told her to stop eating, that the food was bad, that she must not eat it. At first she resisted, saying no. But I pressed sternly until finally I asked if she understood. I understand, she said. It was the first full sentence she had spoken since the strokes. A month later, she passed away. The doctors said she had fallen ill and stopped eating, never understanding why. By then, her bank account had been drained anyway. The son-in-law had been using it to cover his father's household bills. I have no regrets. I loved her, and I couldn't stand to see her left in that state. Her dignity gone, her wishes ignored. This was my way of setting her free. Story 30. When I was younger, I was abusive toward my siblings. My sister, who is 6 years younger, and my brother, who is 3 years younger and severely autistic. From the time I was about 9 until 14, I treated them horribly. I pulled cruel pranks, like peeing in their drinks, and said terrible things to them. Sometimes I even lashed out violently. I remember once calling my sister into the living room, making her lie down, and threatening to stomp on her chest. My parents were usually at work, and my grandmother, who lived with us, didn't really see or intervene in what was going on. At most, I'd get yelled at occasionally, but there were no real consequences. I had serious anger problems, and I took it all out on them. By the time I was 15 or 16, I wasn't as brutal, but I still bullied them for no reason. Now at 21, I look back and feel disgusted with myself. I know how awful I was, and it destroys me inside. I feel like I don't even deserve to be here after the way I treated them. I've changed a lot since then, and my anger issues have improved tremendously. I treat them with respect now and try to show them love. With my brother, it's harder. Because of his autism, I can't express my apology in a way he would fully understand. So I just hope my actions show him that I love him. With my sister, things are better. We're closer now, but not as close as I wish we could be. Sometimes we argue, and when we do, she shuts down completely and won't talk to me for a long time. I suspect that's because of what I did to her in the past. I hope she doesn't hate me too much, though I know I deserve it if she does. I can't give them those years back, no matter how much I want to. I can't undo the pain I caused. All I can do now is keep showing them I've changed, be there for them whenever they need me, and live every day trying to make up for the damage I did. I deeply regret everything, and I'll carry that with me for the rest of my life. Story 31. After living away for 20 years, I moved back home near my family. My brother was in the middle of a divorce. His ex-wife had cheated on him and emotionally abused him for years. He was a mess, but eventually he started dating someone new, a wonderful woman who brought light back into his life, and they're married now. He's doing much better, and I'm happy for him. I love my brother, but I find it hard to be around him. There's something else, something dark, that's been with him since we were kids. We shared a room growing up, and I remember being attacked by this presence more than once, but always when he was around, never when I was alone. Now, when I'm near him, I can feel it again. It terrifies me. My brother is a good man, but whatever this is, it has always surrounded him, and I don't understand why. Sensitivity to spirits runs in my family, though we rarely talk about it. It's not a fun subject. I recently found out some of my nieces and nephews can actually see ghosts, just like some of my cousins always could. I've always been able to feel things around me, and since being back near family, that sensitivity has sharpened. I can block it out if I really try, but if I let my guard down, I feel too much. A family member once told me I'm sensitive, but too afraid to embrace it fully, and they're right. I don't see the benefit in opening myself up more. It's unsettling enough as it is. This isn't something I share with people I know, but it's been weighing on me. I don't know how my brother lives with it. I just know that when I'm near him, that same presence I felt as a child still lingers. Story 32. My parents divorced when I was 5. Back then, I thought my mom was the coolest. She let me do whatever I wanted, watch whatever I wanted, and she played the best friend role. She never kept her promises, but as a kid, I didn't notice as much. Meanwhile, my dad remarried, and I thought my stepmom was the worst. She set rules, created boundaries, and wouldn't let me run the house. Fast forward 25 years, and now I have kids of my own. I understand everything differently. I haven't spoken to my biological mom in 4 years. She's still struggling with addiction, living in denial, refusing help. She's never met my children and never will unless she chooses to get clean. I see now that I spent so much of my life admiring the wrong woman. My stepmom, the woman I now call mom, is the one who showed me what stability and love really look like. She's the grandmother my kids know and adore, and yet I carry shame over how I treated her growing up. Every Mother's Day, I try to write her a card that captures my gratitude, but I've never managed to say it out loud. I call her mom now and treat her the way I should have years ago, but I've never fully articulated the apology I feel I owe her. I know words won't erase the past, but I wish I could find the right ones to tell her how much she means to me and how sorry I am for not seeing it sooner. Story 33. When I was 13, my dad took us to San Francisco. On the first day, we walked across the Golden Gate Bridge, and I thought it was beautiful. I had no idea that people went there to end their lives. Even seeing tourists lean too far over made me uneasy. The next day, we had to cross again on our way to see the redwoods. It was colder and foggy, so the bridge wasn't crowded. As we walked, I noticed someone on the other side of the railing. They had their back to us and were wearing a hoodie, so I couldn't tell if it was a man or woman. Then, without warning, they jumped. It happened so fast that at first it didn't register. Then the realization hit me. There was nothing there to catch them. The shock was overwhelming. I spent the rest of the day trying to convince myself it hadn't happened. I might have succeeded too, if not for the look on Courtney's face, my dad's girlfriend's daughter. She was deeply religious, and I thought that if she had really seen it, she would have said something. Since she didn't, I told myself it wasn't real. There were no cops, no commotion, no sign that anything had happened. For years, I believed I had imagined it. Then in 2006, I watched The Bridge, the documentary about Sioux on the Golden Gate. That's when I realized, in horror, that what I had seen was real, and worse, that many jumps go unseen, unreported, and unnoticed. Somewhere out there, a family may still not know what happened to their loved one. And I live with the weight that I may have been the last person to see them alive, and I said nothing. Story 34. I saw this question yesterday, and it's been on my mind since. I try every day to figure out how I can still be a good person after everything I've lived through. At some point, I made a choice. My past wouldn't define me. I would decide who I am, not let what happened to me decide for me. My parents split in Florida, and not long after, me and my brothers were mostly left to ourselves with little supervision. When we went to live with my dad, things were already chaotic. A neighborhood predator harmed my younger brother, maybe my older one too. When he tried with me, I resisted, but he turned violent and threw me out. Later, at a martial arts studio, another man crossed the line, and while in shock afterward, I was hit by a car as I tried to get away. Not long after, even a babysitter, this time a girl, took advantage of me. I never told anyone. Eventually, my dad took us in. He worked hard and was around, but also absent in a way. When we messed up, he'd knock us on the head. Later, he remarried. My stepmom and I didn't get along, and she was an alcoholic, but she stopped him from hitting us. At the time, I hated her. Today, I call her mom. She was flawed, but she was constant. The only real constant I had, along with one neighborhood friend who is still my friend to this day. My little brother never recovered. He started stealing, breaking into houses, and later became a predator himself. He went to prison for 30 years. When he got out, he committed more terrible acts, including against our sister. But this story isn't about him, it's about me.